On this episode of the Darius Foroux Show, I will show you how to read 100 books in a year. So for the past 4 years, I've been consistently reading 100 books on average a year. Now, when I say this, people often ask me two questions. First of all, they ask, why do you do this? And then they ask, how do you do it? So the answer to the first question is, I read because I want to learn from other people's experience. And I think if you do not learn, you are not moving forward if you are not committed to learning. And once I committed myself to learning, reading was really easy. Before that, I struggled to read books. But I have to be honest that I prefer to learn by reading. Some people are visual learners, other people learn by doing, others by listening. And it really depends on your own skill set and your own strengths. Now, I prefer to read. But the bottom line is this: commit yourself to learning and specifically learn from the experience of others. Otto von Bismarck said it best. He said, "Fools learn from experience." I prefer to learn from the experience of others. And I think that's a great quote because that's what it all comes down to. I think if you study successful people, all of them were massive learners and a lot of them were readers. So let's get down to it. How do you read 100 books a year? So that comes down to 2 books a week. The first step is to buy your books in bulk. And my experience is that when you pick up a book that's not relevant to you, it's very difficult to go through it. Now, life is dynamic, right? You don't know what challenges you will face in the next week or next few months, but you know what kind of direction you're going to, right? So buy books in bulk that are related to your field, whether that is finance, accounting, graphic design, productivity. There are some things that I think are useful to all people, specifically if you look at biographies, history books, personal development books, productivity. These things are, I think, useful for everybody, but there are also books that are specific to the things that you are currently learning, your current priorities, what phase you are in your life. But my recommendation is this: buy books in bulk because you don't know what book you will want to read at a given time. How often have you picked up a book and only put it aside after a few pages, and then maybe a few years later you picked up the book again and then you were like, oh wow, this is awesome, this is a great book. It happened to me very often. That's why I always buy in bulk, so when I want to read something, I have it near me. A lot of people say, well, why would you spend money on books? You can get them for free at the library or download them or whatever. Look, if you are serious about learning, if you're committed to learning, you will make sure that some of your money goes to books. And I'm very serious about this because sometimes you might read an idea or get something out of a book and apply it to your career and make hundreds of thousands of dollars from that single idea from a $10 or $15 book over the course of your career. So don't take it lightly. Pay for books. I think it's a great investment. My second tip is to always be reading. Make sure that you always carry a book, you have a book around, because the more books you have around you, simply the more you will read. If we do the math, right? If we look at the average reading speed of an average person, you will need 10 hours a week of reading to finish 2 books a week, depending on how many pages they are. But let's say most books are between 200 and 300 pages long, right? 10 hours a week. There are 168 hours in a week. Do the math. Everybody can set aside 10 hours in a week, whether you want to read 2 hours a day for 5 days and take off the weekend, or you want to read an hour every day and then maybe on 1 or 2 days spend a little bit more time reading. You can do it. I've been doing this consistently for 4 years now. And it's not just something that I did for 1 year. I've been doing this consistently. And I have a lot of things going on in my life as well. You know, some people say, hey, I have kids, or I have to do this, I have work, and I have all those things. Look, we all have responsibilities. We still make time for things that are important. So if reading is really important to you, make sure that you are always reading. Carry a book with you. Put your phone away. Read on a book on the read a book on a book. Read a book on the train, the bus, when you're riding in Uber. Listen to audio books in the car. That also counts, obviously. So make sure that you are always reading, and then you will easily get to your 10 hours a week. Tip number 3 is read only relevant books. I already touched on this earlier. If I don't find something applicable, if I read ideas and I can't really visualize how I'm going to apply it to my life, I just can't finish the book. I remember years ago, I picked up The Intelligent Investor, and I was like 25 or 26. I just got out of graduate school, 2 years by then. Started making a little bit of money, but not that much money so I could really invest it. So I just couldn't get through the book. I thought it was really boring and not useful. Doesn't mean it's a bad book. It's a great book. I read it a few years ago, and I was like, this is a strategy that I want to use for my investments. So make sure that you only read relevant books to you right now. Look at your life. What's something that's in front of you? What's a challenge that you want to overcome? What's a problem that you have? Read a book that will help you to solve that problem. Tip number 4 is read multiple books simultaneously. So there are no rules to reading books. A lot of people assume that you have to read a book cover to cover and then go to another one, that you have to finish the book. Whoever said that? You make up your own rules. I read sometimes 3 or 4 books at the same time, not literally at the same time, but I'll read something, a business book in the morning. I might read a personal development book in the afternoon, and I might read a biography before I go to sleep. And I still remember the things, I still highlight things, and we'll get to that in the next step, but there are no rules. You can decide how you read, what you read, when you read. It's up to you, it's your life, you can do whatever you want, right? So that also applies to books. If you want to read multiple books at the same time, go ahead. In fact, I really encourage it. And if you haven't tried it, really give it a try, because it helps you to read a lot more than if you only read one book, because that can also get boring. And then tip number 5, which is actually the most important tip. So if you can't read 2 books a week for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world. If you read, make sure you do this. And that is step number 5, retain the knowledge. I think knowledge is useless if you do not apply it, because if you only read and never do anything with it, what's the purpose, right? I cannot think of a reason just to read. I read because I want to use the ideas to make my life, career, business, relationships better. I want to improve myself. I want to learn, right? So that's why I have an example here. That's why I make notes inside books, and I highlight passages, sentences, and pieces from inside a book. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's sacred and you shouldn't write on books. And I'm like, come on, man, just grow up. A book is a tool. A book is a tool. It's not an end. You know, you use this stuff to improve your life, right? So how can you retain more of what you read? I got an example here. This is, by the way, a really good book. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. This is a really good example of a book that I did not read cover to cover. What I did is I've read like 80, 90%, 80%, 85% of this book because some of the things I just didn't, some of the stories inside the book that often in books there's a lot of filler as well. And I don't want to say it's a bad book. It's a really good book, really useful ideas that I've used in negotiations and in my life as well. But some of the things you can skip. If you read something and you think, oh, I can skip this, then go and skip it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. So, for example, what you will see is some of the pages here have no highlights, and then all of a sudden, folded, corners. I dog-eared my books, and then all of a sudden, some areas have a lot of highlights because there was so much value there. And to me, that automatically makes it worth it. Now, I also write inside the books, and I'm just looking for a piece. If you're watching this, I'm looking now for, and if you're listening to this, you'll probably think, what is he doing? Let me just find something. I don't write throughout the whole book because obviously that will make the reading process extremely slow. But if I find something, an idea or something that I find really important and that I connect to something that is going on in my life and that I have to use, look, I just write inside the book. And in this case, I was like, this is a really good idea. And then I either write the idea in my own words, or I try to connect it with something else, some other piece of information or knowledge that I read somewhere else, or I try to, I'll confirm it as well. It'll make me remember it a lot better. And here again, there's some stuff here. I made some notes for myself that I connected with some other things that I've read in the past. So make it an interactive process. If you're reading a book, don't look at it like a static thing. Just read the book. It's like, oh, that's fun, that's great, because you'll forget about all the things. Highlight it, fold the pages, write in it, make notes in your notebook. This is how we start forming connections, and this is how we start making the knowledge our own. And then what you will find is that you will start applying the stuff. When you do that, when you start applying everything you learn, you're making giant steps. And this is something that very few people do, actually. If you look at society, if you look at most people, if you look at averages, most people only read a few books a year. Now, all of a sudden, if you start reading 50, 60, 70, or maybe even 100 books a year, you will set yourself apart from the crowd. And I think that is not only great for your own personal development, but it will also make you more valuable in the marketplace. So give this a try. Let me know in the comments. Or send me an email if you are going to try this or have tried it. Share your experiences, share your lessons. I'm also eager to learn. I've improved my process, my learning process, and reading process over the years, and I'm continuously learning new things. So feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to the show already, feel free to subscribe. And like always, until the next episode, take care. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to check out some of my other videos. And also, don't forget to sign up to my newsletter to get 2 free ebooks in your inbox.